The saga of Casey Anthony began with a missing child report that quickly spiraled into one of the most high-profile and divisive criminal trials in American history. On July 15, 2008, Cindy Anthony, the grandmother of 2-year-old Kaylee Marie Anthony, called 911 to report her granddaughter missing. What made this call particularly alarming was Cindy's assertion that Kaylee had not been seen for 31 days, and that her daughter, Casey Anthony, had given conflicting stories about the child's whereabouts and had a car that smelled distinctly of human decomposition. Casey Anthony, then 22 years old, initially told police a series of elaborate lies. She claimed that Kaylee had been kidnapped by a babysitter named Zani, and that she herself had been working at Universal Studios, statements which quickly unraveled under police scrutiny. Her calm demeanor and lack of urgency during the initial days of the investigation, contrasted with her family's frantic pleas, immediately drew suspicion. The case rapidly escalated from a missing persons investigation to a suspected homicide, with all eyes turning towards Casey. Following Cindy Anthony's 911 call, a massive search effort was launched for Kaylee. Thousands of volunteers joined in, combing through wooded areas and waterways in Central Florida. The community was united in its desperate hope to find the little girl alive. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to wane, replaced by growing alarm and public outrage directed at Casey. Investigators quickly found inconsistencies in Casey's story. There was no Zani the babysitter, and no record of Casey ever working at Universal Studios. Police found that Casey had been living a seemingly normal life, partying and spending time with friends, during the entire period Kaylee was supposedly missing. This behavior deeply disturbed the public and fueled the perception that Casey was somehow involved in her daughter's disappearance. Forensic evidence also began to emerge. Odor analysis of the air in the trunk of Casey's car indicated the presence of human decomposition. Hair samples found in the trunk were microscopically similar to Kaylee's, and some even showed signs consistent with being around a decomposing body. Computer searches from the family's home computer revealed searches for terms like chloroform and neck breaking. While this evidence was circumstantial, it painted a chilling picture for prosecutors and the public alike. The grim confirmation of fears arrived on December 11, 2008, when utility worker Roy Kronk discovered skeletal remains in a wooded area near the Anthony family's home. The remains were later positively identified as those of Kaylee Anthony, confirming the worst fears of the community. The discovery included a small skull with duct tape over the mouth area, a Winnie the Pooh blanket, and a laundry bag. The cause of death could not be definitively determined due to the advanced state of decomposition. With Kaylee's body found, the focus of the investigation intensified on Casey. In October 2008, even before Kaylee's remains were discovered, Casey Anthony was formally charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. The prosecution's theory was that Casey had murdered Kaylee, possibly using chloroform to subdue her and then suffocating her with duct tape to free herself from the responsibilities of motherhood and pursue a carefree lifestyle. They argued that Casey had then stored Kaylee's body in the trunk of her car before disposing of it in the woods. The public's anger towards Casey reached a fever pitch. She became America's most hated mom, with widespread media coverage dissecting every detail of her life and the investigation. Protesters often gathered outside the courthouse, demanding justice for Kaylee. The trial of Casey Anthony began on May 24, 2011, in Orlando, Florida, and lasted for 6 grueling weeks. It was a media circus with live television coverage, online commentary, and constant public scrutiny. The prosecution, led by Linda Drainburdick, presented a case built heavily on circumstantial evidence. Casey's lies, her bizarre behavior after Kaylee's disappearance, the smell in the car, the hair evidence, and the computer searches. They painted Casey as a manipulative, cold-hearted mother who intentionally killed her daughter. However, the defense, led by attorney Jose Baez, presented a counter-narrative that shocked the nation. They claimed that Kaylee had not been murdered, but had accidentally drowned in the family swimming pool on June 16, 2008, while Casey and her father, George Anthony, were present. Baez alleged that George Anthony had helped Casey cover up the accidental death by burying the toddler in their backyard. Furthermore, the defense made explosive accusations that Casey had been sexually abused and molested by her father, George, since she was a child, and that this trauma explained her unusual behavior and her tendency to lie. George Anthony vehemently denied these claims on the stand. The defense argued that the forensic evidence was unreliable, that the odor in the car could have been from trash, and that the computer searches were not necessarily done by Casey. They created reasonable doubt by offering an alternative explanation for Kaylee's death and challenging the validity of the prosecution's scientific evidence. After nearly 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 11 hours. On July 5, 2011, the verdict was delivered, sending shockwaves across the United States. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. She was, however, found guilty on 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to a law enforcement officer. The verdict was met with widespread outrage and disbelief from the public, many of whom were convinced of her guilt. Social media erupted with condemnation, and legal experts debated the jury's decision. The case highlighted the complexities of circumstantial evidence and the high burden of proof required for a criminal conviction. Casey Anthony was given credit for time served and was released from jail on July 17, 2011. Since her release, she has largely remained out of the public eye, though she has given some interviews where she maintains her innocence regarding Kaylee's death. The case of Casey Anthony remains a deeply emotional and polarizing topic, a tragic reminder of a little girl who was lost and a mother who was acquitted, leaving a nation to grapple with the lingering questions of what truly happened to Kaylee Marie Anthony.